Well, hello, and welcome to the Curmudgeon in the Cellar, number 160. Okay, this isn't a brag. This is just answering a bunch of questions that I got when I mentioned that I had a new computer. So it's a custom build. I have a, let's see, it's a Core i7 9th generation processor. And I've got a couple of these 970 EVO NV MEM2 VNAND SSD, 500 gigabytes each. I know I've got a terabyte in the D, and I've got a half a terabyte in the C. And then I've got a wicked, I'm told, because I don't do first-person shooters, but I got a wicked video card. It's an MPG Z390 Gaming Edge AC. And I don't, so anyway, that's just to answer your questions. Then we'll get into what we're really here to talk about tonight. And boy, we got a lot. I'm going to be doing a lot of reading, which means I'm probably going to be flicking on and off the glasses. Okay, this might be a bit too weird or complex for some folks' taste. Oh, well, before we go there, last night I ran a game for Total Con online here, and well, actually in the Zoom room that I have access to, and we had a really, really good time. It's Wheel of Blame 2.0, and I'm going to be doing it again tomorrow night, Saturday night. It's 7 o'clock Eastern. And just heard back from some guys in the Pacific, I don't know, Okinawa, Japan. Anyway, I'm going to be running a game for them real soon. We'll see how we work around the time difference. So anyway, check out TotalCon. I'll bet there's probably still openings. Okay, this might be a bit too weird or complex for some folks' taste, but in my campaign, all magic weapons are intelligence, even if only animal level for the really weak ones. A weapon's plus value doesn't indicate its bonus to hit damage. All magical weapons get only +1 to hit, no bonus to damage, but rather indicate how many six-siders I roll for their intelligence, how many special powers they have. Some powers count as 2, like life stealing, or 3 in the case of Vorpal, and how high the weapon's ego is, which can influence or even dominate the wielder if you're not careful. High intelligence can also grant a weapon extra powers, mostly detection or telepathy, and further increases the weapon's ego rating. Some powerful weapons, especially the chaotic ones, end up more as traps or challenges in their own right rather than just goodies for the party, like this one elven bow who hated dwarves and would sometimes try to force the wielder's arm to shoot their dwarf comrade. That's cool. Sounds interesting. For the underlying, for the underpinnings of a campaign, yeah, I could get behind that. Like so many things, as long as you're consistent, that's the way you play. That's the way it is. And I'm cool with that. It sounds interesting. A little deep for what I would get into, but if that's the way if that's the way you roll, go for it. And there was a comment on top of this. That's cool. It's like Elric's Stormbringer sword started a university for other swords or something. Now that's a fun concept to run with. Yes, Excalibur, I think you could be even greater, and that's why I'm sending you off to graduate school. But it is an interesting. It's a chuckle. MC Cascoid, monsters, love it or shove it. Monster condos, convenience versus contrivance. I've come across some opinions about monster condos slash mega dungeons demanding a rational an ecology. By the way, did you coin that term? Your Wheel of Blame has a workaround for it, although it is in a mega dungeon. So let's widen the field of debate a little here. How do you feel about this? The idea of all encounters mega dungeons having some internally consistent rationale. I think you have to, don't you? If you look at the creation of a campaign, the organic self creation of a campaign, if you will, as the structure of a novel, structuring a novel, putting together a novel, you've got to have some internal consistency. You have to have a framework upon which you can hang all these other bells and whistles. So absolutely, you need a framework. Um, so much in here. Yeah, you need an ecology. Frank Menser did Lich Dungeon was 1 and 2, and his those are written up like owner's manuals for the Death Star. I mean, everything's figured out, and when the patrols patrol, and when the cleanup guys clean up, and all that kind of thing. So it's very busy, but if they rely on schedules, then you can, you know, case the joint. So I think every good story has to have a coherent structure in the middle, some sort of coherency to hold it all together. And it's all well and good to talk about the willing suspension of disbelief, but you got to think that when you're going to let go and fall into that disbelief, you have some idea of where you're going to land. I just think that's fair. I think mega dungeons certainly need an ecology. Otherwise, I once thought about having a group of adventurers find the ruins of an underground dungeon, and room after room after room, nothing but dead monsters, petrified, mummified, skeletonized, whatever, because they would all find out at the end that it was an OD&D first dungeon, which we all did, and didn't think about what do they eat, where's the poop go. We didn't do any of that, so that would be fun. You have to have an internal. There has to be an internal logic, otherwise it's just crazy. Um, and right, Wheel of Blame's a whole different ballgame. So no one had a defense against mind attacks, so you created a system where only 1 in 200 would have it. A great deal of disbelief I read between the lines here. And in answer to that, if it was too common, then mind flayers wouldn't have been so scary. Exactly. Mind flayers were so scary that you would no more think about putting 2 of them in a dungeon than you would 2 beholders. Scary stuff. Scary stuff. If you watch Second City, scary stuff. Um, so if you're gonna, as the DM, if you're gonna introduce a mind flayer, a brain mole, or an intellect devourer, or any of those things, it would behoove you as the creator to either have an NPC with some rudimentary powers, you know, not Doctor Strange lurking in beggar's robes outside the castle door or the city gates, but they were supposed to be rare. They're supposed to be horrible. They weren't that hard to miss their saving, you know, to make your saving throws on, and if you did, they were fairly easy to kill. So yeah, a little later on, I'm going to tell you about the 2 sides of TSR's creative process, what we wanted to happen and what we knew would happen. And this is one of those places. And when I get there, you'll know why. All right, now this is a long one. Broad question on game making. This may not be precisely in your bailiwick, but with all your experience, your opinion counts. Well, okay, whatever. Man, making a game and developing mechanics. To some extent, the DM's golden rule, because I said so, must apply. At the same time, mechanics must have some kind of internal consistency. Here's this logical underpinning. Do you think that there should be greater importance on finding a way to connect rules and mechanics logically, or is it fine, maybe even better, for different mechanics to be discrete from each other? Arbitrary rules versus unified field theory of mechanics. I'm guessing I'm asking, though, obviously a mixture is another and probably more typical option. Adjunctively, what importance would you place on inspiration when designing game mechanics? I found it to be both enlivening and impeding at times. Really enjoying the vids. Okay. He's really okay. This guy's played in the wheel before, and he's looking forward to come back and playing in 2.0. Yeah, here again, this goes to consistency within the rules. Just like every time you know that you throw a lit match into that little pile of gunpowder, it's going to ignite. Okay, consistency. You have to have that. Physics have to work the same most of the time. That's not to say that you can't have local or regional weirdnesses. All right, but there has to be a basic. Hi, this is the way the world works. Apples fall down and feathers float on the breeze. Okay. Um, you have to have that consistency, that internal logic. Otherwise, it's just all over the place, and there's nothing going on there. I believe that there should be some basic logic. You can parse it out to the detail of how logical and logical here in the case is the reality or the seeming of reality that we can wrap our heads around and therefore accept as part of the whole of what we're experiencing in our minds. That's that for some heavy duty shit. Um, oh, speaking of which, I got a great gift from a great friend the other day. I don't know if you can see this. It's a little goat. But it's not just any goat. It's a screaming goat. I'm going to start using that on my online games. When they hear the goat scream, it's like shit, it's all over. All right. You have to have that interior consistency, or you can. It can be great fun to put them into a castle somewhere on a peak where nothing works the same. That's great fun. Fish out of water, or just pure experimentation to see what's going on. This next one, thank you. I always give you a like before listening. I've yet to take one away. Well, I appreciate your optimism, and thanks for the like. Now here's the one that I could wax rhapsodic on for hours, but I'll choose not to. What are your favorite RPGs of all time? Well, for sci-fi, floating around in space stuff, my heart will always be on the Warden and MA, Metamorphosis Alpha. Though I did enjoy the other one we did, whose name is escaping me right now. It always happens late at night, possibly due to the situation there and preparations. Anyway, Gamma World. I used to like Gamma World, but I really like Mutant Crawl Classics now. I really like the flavor and the feel of the game and the mechanics. And of course, I've been involved helping with editing some stuff. But I really do enjoy it. Um, for anthropomorphics, I really enjoy Mouse Guard. I think that's a brilliant game, and I would use it to teach kids and play with kids because it's not at all brutal and nasty, and you can make it as challenging and puzzling as you want. And bunnies and burrows, just because it's so bizarre to become a bunny. How far away is it? Many. You can't count. It's of course D&D or any of the clones. Swords and Wizardry. What I play is such an amalgam of all those in that genre in that period of time. Um, that would be my favorites there. Um, there's really no others that I've played any amount of time. Back on the question earlier, there was a comment about inspiration and mechanics. Um, yeah, I've been inspired to do mechanics, and in writing if for instance I was writing an adventure where there are a number of sturge-like creatures and they swarm. Well, you can't hit them all one at a time because you'd run out of arrows and sling stones and whatever in a good size because you can't hit it every time. But if they're all swarming you and swatting you and swarming around your person, I developed a mechanic for this particular game of depending upon how well you roll a 20-sider, how many you can swat out of the air, just swat them out of the air and they're dead. No fighting them or anything. And it enables you to thin the herd quickly. Not so quickly that if they have some good rolls and or if you're wearing bad armor, poor armor or whatever, they aren't going to get through a few times. But unlike sturges, they don't fasten on you and drain you of your blood, and you don't pass out on the floor. Though that was a great picture. I really enjoyed seeing that. That was one of Dave's early ones. So I guess those would be my favorite role-playing games. Does a high charisma of 17 or 18 have a natural charm person effect? Maybe a small one. Well, this is one of those areas, if I were rolling a game, and I determined that if you encountered this individual, their attitude would probably be, this and such, whatever. And to go back again on a mechanic, I came up with another mechanic once. I wrote an adventure and again, this was just an inspirational thing, and I'll tell you how it worked out to my great surprise. The adventure involved these big polar bears being mind controlled, and they were really large and standing on their back legs. And so I came up with a mechanic that if the bears got a hold of you, how soon it was going to be that your spine snapped, or how soon how hard would it be to get away, or whatever. And so I had this mechanic here. This is how we're going to do it. Easy peasy, roll the dice. Okay. Well, it so happened in the course of the game that one of the player characters got a potion of giant strength and decided to drink it. And so they ended up a dwarf with hill giant strength, and he went out to wrestle the bears. And he killed them both because all I did was I took the mechanic and reversed it. So sometimes inspiration strikes, and then it strikes again at a later time and works out really great. So I'm sorry, I'm hopping around tonight, I know. But I try not to write down too much, but there's so much stuff. I mean, 4.5 pages of questions tonight. So if 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 I had a tavern keeper that was 70% non-committal, strictly business, not nasty, not kind, whatever, and you went in and you rolled a 68, you know, or I would fade things, shade things, fudge a little in that regard. In non-critical encounters, if you're, I always said, roll against your charisma, and if you make the roll, you win them over. And 17 or 18 is almost, there's only a 10 or 15% chance, respectively, 15 or 10, that they're not going to succeed already. That's really kind of enough, in my opinion. All right, here's another off the wall question or statement, depending upon how you want to react to it. And believe me, it's not a request or demand, nor even the major portion of my questions is the amusement of how much you react and when you read them more than just the answer. So without further ado, well, good, I'm glad we're there. If you were to dramatize or imagine Howard Stern and Rush Limbaugh, RIP, as some kind of characters, either NPCs or PCs, or monsters interacting in a D&D game, along with some other high publicity people, living or dead perhaps, what would that be like? Personally, okay, he goes on. I kind of liked what Bill Hicks' colorful description of Rush Limbaugh, but that's mentioned entirely for members of your audience who aren't into the pansy, squeamish, snowflake cancel culture, SJW bullshit, and the woke politically correct censorship to find and discover entirely on their own obviously. Okay, we've made all the disclaimers. If I was going to put personalities in, I would make them an NPC that could either fool with, screw with the characters or give them some information. But I can't see any incentive to do much more than that myself. All right. I never knew anything about the Harold Shea novels until you mentioned them, but took the time at least find the Wikipedia entry on Green Magician, where it notes that the Dragon magazine, June 78, which I suppose you made happen. Yes, I did. It was repeated for the first time in 36 years. The question I asked last time started asking what you thought of any of Stephen Donaldson's work. And to be honest, it's been so long since I read Donaldson, other than I do recall that I read some of his uh, Thomas Covenant, and then I got tired of them, too many of them coming out. And I really have no opinion one way or another on his work because I've not read a whole lot of it. My God, there's so many great writers out there. I don't know how you it's pretty much hit and miss, isn't it? I go to the library, and so and we have a dandy library system here in Ohio because I can call books from anywhere in the state. Um, so if I don't see it at the library, I don't get a chance to read it. I don't read critical reviews because you can't find any good ones on fantasy and swords and sorcery. And I'm not going to subscribe to a magazine just because they do some reviews that I may or may not disagree with. Anyway, so now I wouldn't get into that. Now, I just don't know. Uh, I don't play. I like to play fish out of water, except actually, I like to play fish in water. I wrote an adventure where they have to go out into the water, kind of like if you never saw the 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea by the old Disney with Kirk Douglas in it, It's got some great visuals in it. And they're, and it's all in the bottom of a big water tank, but still, they're trudging along in their diving suits. And so I put oxygen breathing apparati of a magical sort available, and they have to go out and do something out in the water. So I like to see, how that kind of stuff plays out. Let's see what else. Lord Falls, Bane. Well, again, there's something. I don't just read fantasy. In fact, most of what I read is historical fiction or historical stuff. That's a fact. Okay, back to psionics again. Does your current style of DMing OSR homebrew style have psionicist PCs as possible? In my opinion, psionicism is another way to put hereditary or some unexplainable innate talent for paranormal power or magic into the character instead of the trained formal scholastic discipline of studying how spells can be cast. Yada da da da. Okay. You. All right. I'm gonna be. Well, this is also the questions, the answers that are coming up also pertain to this particular thing. I don't. If I were to start a new campaign today, I wouldn't have psionics at all. As a general thing, if there was anything involved, it would be extremely rare and extremely infrequent. And whenever I put something in, there's always a way to balance it. There has to be, or what's the point? So no, I wouldn't have that. Now, I might have NPCs with psionic abilities, and I might allow them to, be hired or whatever, or to perform certain functions. Do I prefer sword and sorcery style play or high fantasy? Well, I'm not exactly sure what that distinction means. I like a good hack 'em, slack 'em, roll the dice, good old melee combat. But I also like the idea of higher powers of work, and we're all just pawns on the chessboard of the universe. And if that's high fantasy, if high fantasy is something like the Dragon Riders of Pern, those were great books. I enjoyed the hell out of them. Earthsea, great books, if that's high fantasy. But if what you mean by sword and sorcery is Poul Anderson and Robert E. Howard and that, I like that too. But then again, I'm assuming that's what you meant. Okay. All right. Now we have two here. And this is the big payoff. Pardon me. I need some more drink. And I need another toke of my vape. Thanks for pointing me over here from Facebook. We've had a number of conversations recently about why the combat matrices in first edition AD&D got moved into the DMG, whereas they were previously in the player's book for OD&D Volume 1 Manage Magic. Why would you say that was? Hold that thought. First edition AD&D has the novel quality, unlike any edition before or after, of reserving the attack, saving throw, etc. matrices to the DMG and allegedly not be player facing. Anyone know exactly what the motivation was for that? Looking for specific quotes, references, or recollections of chat with Gaga's car, etc. Okay, this is a question in Facebook by Daniel Collins. And he didn't think to say, well, yeah, you could ask me. All right. Here is the great Janus side, if a side can have two sides anyway, of our working in from 75 to 80 while I was there. We believed in the very first books, in compiling all those rules into something that had never been done before, etc. The most interesting stuff was in the first book, and then the really important stuff was in the second, and a lot of in the third was less important, higher up in the campaign, okay, so those books were put together from a publishing point of the most important stuff first, just as though you would write an article. The most important stuff first, and then the interesting stuff, and then the fleshing out stuff, because it's always the fleshing out stuff that the editor cuts. In this case, that didn't happen. So that's why the first set was laid out that way. Now, Gary and I had several discussions about both the marketing of the three hardbounds and what should be where and the order that they should come out in. Yes, it would have been good if only the dungeon master had all those things. Yes, it would be good if only the dungeon master had the monster manual. Because then only he would know as soon as they see something that's 8 foot, 7 foot tall, blah, 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 blah. That would be great. We knew and chuckled up our sleeves. that wasn't going to happen. We knew everybody was going to buy the monster manual. Everybody. Because DMs wanted to have all those monsters at their fingertips. The players wanted to know what they had to face. We knew that everybody would buy the player handbook. Because everybody's, at least thinks of themselves as a player. Now, did we believe that only DMs, maybe 15% of the D&D population, figuring each DM had 7 players or 6, something like that. Did we think that only the DMs were going to buy that? Hell no. We knew, we knew that everybody was going to buy every one of those books. So now it was, which one do we come out with first? Let's give them the monsters. That'll drive them crazy. And so now we had all these new monsters and everything in there and all that great artwork in there. And sure enough, the public lapped it up. And that's why it was that way in the beginning. That's why the rules of running the game are in the Dungeon Master's Guide. He's the one running the game. He's the conductor on the train. We very cynically knew that if there was a table of 7 players, 1 DM, and 6 players, that at that table there are going to be at least 5 of all the books. And the only reason there wasn't everybody was only because they hadn't bought them all yet. It's all it was. The first books were published in a magazine or a published paper type of format. The most important that lays out the structure for the rest. And it went down in decreasing order of how germane was it to the everyday playing of the game? So all the stuff about building your keeps and all that was relegated to the end, as well as should have been, I believe. Sorry, I can't give you specific quotes. I can only give you the recollection of the conferences and the talks and the chats that guy had with Gary and other people at TSR also, to be fair. We occasionally had, just spontaneous, well, what do you think about? And 3 or 4 of us would stand around and bat that idea back and forth. Okay. I won't disagree on the point of spellcasters being overpowered in 5e, though I'd argue ubiquitous rather than truly overpower. It's rare to have a party that isn't mostly spellcasters, just a consequence of the balance of classes and subclasses available. But if you can believe it, it's actually significantly toned down from the mess it was third, where if you weren't a cleric, druid, or wizard, you might as well stop playing after level 6 because you'd contribute next to nothing in or out of combat. Okay, ubiquitous, and I just, from what I discern, what I glean from conversations, and that is that 5e's a little Twinkie, magic happy, too many sparkles and unicorns. That's what I hear. I also hear a lot of people saying that they're growing disenchanted with it because it's so I guess you'd have to call that imbalance. I mean, isn't that what you'd call imbalance? That there's no point in playing after levels 5 or 6. Okay, delving back into some old issues of the Dragon, there are some advertisements for play-by-mail. Did you ever try this? And how on world did you ever do combat? Stay safe. Okay. I do not know of any RPG that was ever successfully played by mail. Not any RPG as we know it today. Play by mail was board games or minis games abstracted, but those were much more rare because both parties had to have all the same number of the similar types of figures and whatever, whereas with play by mail board games, each party just had to have the copy of the game, and you mailed on a postcard, much like chess. This one to here and this one to there, and you had, it was a lot of writing before there were digital cameras and scanners and stuff like that. But that's how you did it. Now, diplomacy was the main play-by-mail game, and it's easy to write out. You write out the moves in advance anyway. A navy into the Bosphorus, two armies into Turkey, that type of moves. And so one person was responsible for keeping the master game. Most everybody else caught up, or sometimes you didn't know where the other guys were. It was just depend upon who was running the game and how much mystery and fog of war they wanted to put into it. And it was excruciatingly slow because it was a postcard. So if you were playing with somebody, didn't matter if you were in Lake Geneva playing with somebody in Minneapolis, it was at least 2 days. It was 2 days to get there, a day or two for your gamer friend to respond and mail it back. And there's another couple of days, except now a weekend pops in. So yeah, it was slow, and you had to really want to do it. I started in 3.0 and have moved through the editions after that. Settled on old school essentials, basic D&D, and love it. And a comment to that, not too different here. Played a 3.5 first, got bumped out. Then 4 came out, found some of the old OSR blogs, and discovered OD&D. Been old school ever since. Didn't know how much I hated 3rd until I stopped playing it. Okay, whatever you're playing, chances are you're not playing 3 and 3.5 and watching this. But even if you are, if you're having fun, I never condemn anybody having fun. Even if I know they're playing by the wrong rules. If you're having fun, that's all that matters. Games are just an entertainment. Now, they can be a mental exercise, and they can be an exercise in camaraderie. But so can playing whist. So can throwing horseshoes. Right? It's a means of friendly competition. Nobody plays checkers to lose, unless you're playing with your 5-year-old niece. And you don't so much play to lose as not make good moves. And for the last comment here, obviously when I was talking about my dice bag, and this is from a good friend of mine, as my good friend says, the dice don't lie. No, they lie right there on the table. It's how we read them. Whether we read them true or do a fudge. I can honestly say that I've fudged lots of die rolls, never once to the disadvantage of the players or the party. I've never given them extra damage or hit them when they didn't deserve to be hit or anything like that. You play your way, I'll play mine. And here we are, still locked in the pandemic. The numbers are going down. There's hope on the horizon. And I'm not being facetious. I've got a couple of weeks. I get my second shot. Looking forward to going to a couple of cons this fall. In the meantime, I've got a game. Well, it'll be tonight by the time most of you see this. It'll be Saturday night. Got a game, and I got 4 I'm running at GaryCon. So, if you want to play the Wheel of Blame 2.0, there's a chance at GaryCon. I'll be running some for North Texas in June, and then hoping to attend somewhere in the Midwest in the fall or early winter. In the meantime, wear a mask, wear 2, wear a paper one, wear a cloth one. We've all learned to breathe through them now. The people that tell me a year later, oh, I can't do it, I can't do it, I can't do it, unless they're mentally ill, they're just twats. Wear your mask, cough in your elbow, wash your hands a lot, social distance, stay safe. Da-da go. Oh, hello. I'm still figuring out when this thing starts. Welcome to my cellar.
He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs. Still quite a feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Last man around when them rates went down. Called it Gary in that Lake Geneva town. Hey Gary, it's an awful mess. Let me edit, we'll have success. D&D and Dragon Magazine. He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Magic missile, it's a mortar shell. Make it hit in the first level spell. Brought Psionics to the game to attack that wizard's brain. ESR and fantasy, collection of micro armory. Titan with tramp under a tree, high as could be. He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Curmudgeon.